All right, this one is going to be a great chat. It's in the trenches between Web2 and Web3, and we've got Olivier and Sandi. Sandi from Calimero, Olivier from ParcelChain. They're going to be speaking and comparing and contrasting Web2 and Web3, varying approaches and philosophies. Please welcome them up to the stage, Olivier and Sandi. Let's go, everybody. Woo!
Hello, everyone.
Hello, can you hear us? Works, amazing. So first off, maybe we can start with an introduction. Olivier, you can start, maybe just a few words about yourself I can introduce, and then we can dive into the topic.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivier. As a short introduction, I joined Google in 2005, and I'm one of the co-founders of Google Cloud in Europe. I've been there for 10 years and acted as CTO for all these years. Hopefully, this is experience I can share today and make a few parallels with Web3. I've been also helping a lot of companies in transforming through cloud, some of their business, mainly in the finance area, helping a few large banks to transform, as much as in the logistics arena. I was, 2 years CTPO for a logistics organization in Barcelona called PAC Logistics, Series C to Series D. And more recently, I co-founded ParcelChain. ParcelChain, in a few words, is the Uber for parcel deliveries. We help connect individual commuters, you and I, traveling every single day, to merchants looking for parcel transport. By doing so, we're acting responsibly, and we're providing a last-mile sustainable offering. Obviously, at the same time, we're bringing money to all our local commuters.
Okay, so my name is Sandi. I used to work at Facebook. I joined Near as an early engineer, first infrastructure engineer, and currently I'm a CEO of Calimero, which is essentially private sharding and private data layer on Near. And today we're just gonna try to discuss what were the similarities between Web2 and Web3, what were the hard things in Web2 which people forget maybe, which have to be solved similar to Web3. So I have this question, when you have to say what would be the Web3 adoption, how do you see Web3 adoption right now from your perspective, looking back? What would you say?
Well, I must say, just coming to this conference feels very energizing when I see how passionate people are all around. So I feel the buzz like in many years when I was Google. I feel, to answer your question, I feel Web3 is really still in the innovators phase, if we just referencing to Jeffrey's more crossing the chasm bell curve. But still, we can see the premise of some of the early adopters trying to leverage some of the core capabilities of Web3. I still feel, back to the innovator stage, it still feels really hard. ParcelChain is a Web3 application, so we've obviously been building onto Calimeros, but it still feels really hard for engineers, to pass this learning curve and really adopt Web3, start understanding smart contracts and how you can chain them together. So I still feel like there is a certain step for the whole engineering community to hop onto the Web3 environment. And I think Web3 does things really, really well, but it doesn't do everything. And I think like every single major technology change, you should leverage and you should focus on what it does really well. At ParcelChain, as an example, we enjoy the immutability of transactions. We enjoy the ability of managing ownership through NFTs and the simplicity to integrate wallets. But we don't expect everything to be delivered through Web3. So we're still using a hybrid model where some of the capabilities are on Web2 and some on Web3. And last and least, I would say not everything is real time. And when you're thinking about Web3 transactions, they're not sub-second yet. So again, trying to map some of the capabilities that you can build on these days and how these match to use cases is potentially where we are.
Okay, sounds good. For me, I wanted to give a tangent. When I joined from Facebook to the Web3 space, I was always interested, how can we build applications which everybody can use, applications which will be scalable, usable, and stuff. And in our perspective, now we built some basic product demos after 4 years being at Near, where the user experience is not so bad, and we are kind of every year getting there more and more. So my question for you is how do you see this like innovation takes time perspective. Like, how was it from your perspective in cloud? Like, was everything immediate, as you would expect? Google is a big organization, or even in the 90s. What do you think? Like, is it as fast? Is Web3 slower than the other things, or it's?
No, I think Web3, like most of the other technologies which kind of disrupted the place, think cloud in the same way, usually take about 10 years to really solidify within the ecosystem and bring benefits to almost every single customer. So cloud was no different. Just to give you some milestones so you can reflect on, when I was at Google, we launched Google Apps in 2008. The first enterprise customer joined in June 2009. So that was about a year and a half later. And the first customer was about 10,000 users. So it wasn't just a small step. It was really kind of an endorsement from the wider IT community that there could be large organizations leveraging cloud technologies to replace some of the backbone of the IT environment. Messaging and collaboration at the time was core. So it's interesting to see that this takes time, even though now we might feel like it's normal and everyone is really using cloud as a stepping stone for building applications. It wasn't at all in 2008. And you have this kind of different milestones which basically kind of open up every single time. So this first customer in France, which basically endorsed Google Apps, pulled the whole market up. I mean, a lot of small organizations were using Google Apps, but there was immediately an acceleration in the adoption. And I think where was the tipping point was about 2 years later, BBVA was the first bank to go Google. That means the 30,000 users endorsed Google Apps as much as started using cloud as an underpinning environment to run some of the applications. So they really shared the vision that we had at the time that cloud ultimately would be the back end of every single IT shop. And this was a tsunami, to be candid. This really had a tsunami effect in the sense that people didn't feel like any bank would ever go cloud because they immediately felt there would be regulatory constraints, there would be data privacy issues. And these were points that we obviously worked upfront with regulators, with customers, just to reassure them on how data was being managed, how we could comply at the time with different regulatory constraints. So yeah, I think from the outside it always feels like it's easy. It wasn't, and I think Web3 is no different. Web3 will take time for accelerating. We'll potentially use different channels, some B2C, which I've heard a lot today, some B2B as well. And ultimately, this will be, a stepping stone in the platform being used in the future.
Sounds good. I have one more question. I always like to ask, like, what are the values people like in the open web? What brings them here? I said, like, when I joined from from Facebook to Near, like, one of the things for me which was very important was, this data ownership thing. And like now, working at Near and working in Calimero, we kind of have the two values which brings us one side privacy to make sure that the users and companies have the rights to privacy, on the other side that they get the data ownership. So I think the question I wanted to ask you for ParcelChain, the company you're currently running, how come it came into Web3 and like what do you see as the biggest values you can capitalize on Web3 which is different from Web2?
I think I'll start with your point. I mean, it might sound interesting, from my background at Google. I think Google has probably done the best, acting as the best safeguard of, users' data. And I think I can tell you from the inside, they really do everything they can to protect users' data constantly from any infringement, whatever it could be. I really believe in Web3 as a way to keep the users in control of their own data. And I think for me, this is the next paradigm change where, people can see the evolution from Web2 to Web3. Why did we go Web3 at ParcelChain? Well, exactly along these lines. If you think of, if you step back a little bit on the delivery environment, there are major issues for us every day as we get parcels being delivered. The number one is there's a lot of data and labels that you receive. Everyone can simply know your address, eventually your phone number, if this is written on labels, and get access to a lot of sensitive data. So again, when you reflect back on Web3, you're like, wow. But in real, we're already sharing a lot of private data without taking care of. So I think our attempt to use Web3 at ParcelChain was really leveraging this fact. There is no need for labels on parcels. There is no need to frontline sensitive information as long as we can keep users in control of the data on our platform. That was the number one point. The second was obviously we need immutability of transactions. Finance is no different, or logistics is no different than finance. Obviously finance makes sense because we think about financial transactions, but it's the same in logistics. I'm going to give you an example. I ordered a book on Amazon. I'm living in a small village in France, which is probably like 15 kilometers away from the next city, where the warehouse is. And even though I ordered on Amazon, the parcel never got delivered. So what happened is a couple of days later, Amazon was notifying me that the shipment was done and delivered, but no one came to my door. The carrier decided not to come to my door, and the reason was simple. It takes them too much. It cost them too much to come and drive half-empty a truck to bring this book to me. This is what we're calling in the industry a fake delivery, and it's happening more and more. Why is this important? Because Amazon doesn't even know that the carrier didn't bring the book to me. And obviously what's impacting Amazon is I become an unhappy customer like many others. So why immutability of transaction can really help us is we can finally provide tracing of who does what along the way. So we keep track of who is liable if an incident happens, and basically bring this liability back to them. I'm sure you've maybe experienced the fact that sometimes you expected something to be delivered and you never received anything. What do? You call back the retailer, and the retailer will ship you another parcel again, doubling the cost. So on one side, it's like keeping track of everything. On the other, it's obviously fighting fraud that is really happening within the logistic environment. So again, these were the core reasons of why we wanted to go Web3. Obviously, as we're building ParcelChain, we're building this as a platform. So far, we have a single service, which is about shipment. But next, there will be more, as we expect. And having this wallet integration makes things really simple. So we can have liquidity on the platform. You could basically buy something and resell another. And we basically build this sense of community along the way. So this was definitely really important to us.
Yeah, I have one more topic, which we discussed many times, and I think it's very interesting for the people to hear about it. So when we started Calimero as the company, private sharding, we wanted to target enterprise customers, and I had a very hard time talking to enterprises, months of talking, and never happened something. And then we kind of decided to focus on companies who are trying to sell to enterprises to build on top of us. And there's always this discussion for many years, Web3 will be an enterprise-used product, and many people disagree. From your perspective, what do you think that we as a Web3 industry have to do to get to the point where enterprises are using us as a default thing? And will it ever happen? Maybe it just becomes this anarchy thing, which we say enterprises never use blockchain because of, I don't know why.
I think in 2005, when I joined Google, people were telling me I was joining a dummy search company. No one believed that how simple was search on the consumer side could be brought inside the enterprise because, of course, enterprise had richer, more complex environment and data. The evidence is not. But it takes time, and I think it takes multiple channels for you to become the de facto player, so making Web3 a de facto for everyone. First, you've got to look at all different channels. It's really important that, from a consumer front and, near being, mainnet, being a front line to everything happening in the ecosystem is really important because it brings visibility, it validates the technicality behind it, the scalability and all these facts. And, this is one of the three channels. So obviously you go consumer, public consumers, then you move into the B2C environment where it's a lot of small shops looking for leveraging Web3 in one way or the other. And the third is really the enterprise, which brings more loyalty, trust, which is also much harder to enter because you've got to prove yourself. You may be asked to do, to add features that you may not have. So it's always, trying to find the equilibrium in between what is reasonable, what is making sense for the product to be shipped into the enterprise world, as much as, what it's good at. And making sure, again, that's the point I was making earlier, you're not a one-stop shop. You don't want everything to happen on Web3. You want, what you're really best at to happen on Web3 and basically play integration with everything else. So I think for me, the answer to that is you need to look after the whole three channels. They all have benefits. Obviously, it goes faster on the B2C channel than it would go on B2B. It's also, higher churn, so you've got to keep on people, with new features, with the speed and velocity that they would expect. And at the same time, enterprise gives you the solidity and and the foothold that you want to, land, maybe small initially, but expand very quickly, so you've got a larger foot stake later. I'll give you some examples just to resonate a bit more. When we started with Google Cloud, you might think Google Apps, but they were also, really important building blocks for us at the time. I can think of BigQuery or just App Engine. When Kate and William got married in the UK, they obviously had a need to have like a website to let everyone, stay aware and share best wishes to the royal princess and prince. And they basically used App Engine at the time. And App Engine basically really helped us, spinning up this environment very quickly, scale to millions of hits whenever they got married, and then just vanish and disappear like 2 or 3 weeks later. It was very economical, it was really simple to manage, and it fitted really well this use case. We also worked with the National Security Organization in the UK because we wanted to be able to trove, millions and billions of data records, medical records, to see and detect any insights for specific diseases. And this is when BigQuery really fitted well. So I think the difference in between enterprise and B2C is it's not a one-stop shop. You've got to identify the use case, what part of the play will work extremely well, for which there is no competition whatsoever, and then land there, however small it might seem initially, but because this will grow and land much bigger later. So again, very different approach, still with the same portfolio of products, obviously.
Okay. We have 4 more minutes. I have a hot question.
I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, no, that's good. We want to hear your opinion. They can hear me every day. I talk too much either way. So, one thing, when I joined the space, DeFi was very hot. I never liked the DeFi. Tokenize everything in the world. Tokenize this, tokenize that, tokenize this. We share a perspective which is similar around it, and I can talk about tokenizing everything. But I would love to hear your opinion as, what do you think about tokenizing everything? Is the value of blockchain just tokenizing everything, or is there something else there behind it?
I think there is, at least in the outside world, a lot of confusion because people think, Web3 and blockchain and Web3 and DeFi is kind of the same. And I feel like it's really 2 different things. DeFi for me is really business transformation. It's about disrupting the financial environment and providing something which is really unique in terms of decentralization of payments. So definitely something which is appealing, but really fits within the business transformation arena. I think when we talk about Web3, it's really underpinning a whole transformation, whichever industry you sit in. So it feels very much along the lines of cloud or virtualization, anything else which we've seen in the past, which you might underestimate initially, but has fundamental changes down the line. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a technologist by background, so I feel much more appealed, as you know, by Web3 than I would by DeFi. But again, I think we have to split these 2 together, so Web3 doesn't get hindered because people confuse the 2 together.
Okay. One more question. I thought there's gonna be more. Let me ask you one more. I have ad hoc questions. Are regulations slowing down Web3? What do you think? Regulations and Web3. You say you talked about you talked about cloud. Companies were not willing to adopt cloud because of security and privacy concerns and regulation. How do you think that applies into Web3?
Well, I think in the same way, right? People will be asking, okay, but where is still sitting the data? Who could eventually access my data? So as part of my role within the Google Cloud environment, I was also helping building the roadmap in terms of certifications for Google Cloud to be accessible across multiple environments. and the challenge is obviously as you build a global infrastructure, you're still hitting local regulators. And you've got to eventually split and dice things just to suit the local regulators. So I think the same applied at the time. If you think of cloud, no one could walk inside a Google data center to see how data was stored. And for good reasons, to be candid. Because everything was virtualized, so it's not like one server was owning more data of one service than another. It was changing constantly and fully dynamic, and it was just trying to help explain to regulators what was done upfront in terms of guidance and policies, so that they would, any enterprise customers could still have access, and only them have access to their own data. So a lot of it was around recommendation, was around communications, was around providing clear principles to the outset on how Google was handling the data. And I think the same applies with Web3, right? I trust, you, Calimero, and Near to do the right things from a background, from a regulatory perspective, so I can comply as well as a customer of yours and make sure that you also hosting my data correctly. So I think a lot of it is down to communication, explaining things, explaining how technology can map to some of the specificities to the outside. And I think the simpler it is, the better. You want to go against complexity and really explain very simply to people how technology is being managed.
Okay, we have 5 more seconds. One quick question. First word which pops to your mind when you hear open web. One word.
Freedom.
Freedom. All right. Trust for me. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank
I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Olivier, for coming
Pleasure.
here. And
go Web3.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.